In the year 2543, humanity had spread its influence across the stars. Empires rose and fell, but the tenacity of the human spirit remained, blazing like an undying fire. Despite their technological advances, humans were still regarded by many alien species as primitive, too emotional, too attached to their past, and stubborn in ways that bordered on reckless. But that recklessness had saved them more times than any advanced strategy ever could. Commander John "Old Dog" Harrison was living proof of that. A seasoned veteran of the human expeditionary fleet, he had seen more battles than most could count. His hair, once dark, had long since gone silver, and his body bore the scars of countless wars. But in his sharp eyes, the fire of determination still burned bright. The nickname, Old Dog, wasn't just a reference to his age, but to the saying, "You can teach an old dog new tricks." The thing was, John Harrison didn't need new tricks. His old ones worked just fine. As he Saturday aboard the bridge of the UN ironclad, humanity's last hope in the battle against the encroaching Grintax swarm, he couldn't help but think back to the earlier days when he was just another fresh recruit in the endless cosmic sea of soldiers. But now, with the fate of Earth itself hanging in the balance, those memories felt like distant dreams. "Sir, Grintax fleet incoming. They'll be within range in 2 minutes," shouted Lieutenant Farah, her voice barely masking her fear. "Calm down, Lieutenant," John replied in his gravelly voice, leaning back in his command chair. "We've been through worse." "Worse, sir? This is the largest fleet we've ever faced. Our reinforcements aren't coming for another hour, and we're outnumbered 10 to 1, she exclaimed. John gave her a reassuring smile, a rarity for him. "That just means we have them right where we want them." The crew exchanged nervous glances. To any outsider, this would seem like the ramblings of a man too old for command, but those who knew John Harrison understood that when the odds were most desperate, that's when he was at his best. The Grintax were a fearsome enemy, standing twice the height of an average human. They were insect-like creatures with a hive mind, and their ships mirrored that organic design living vessels bred for war. They had swept across the galaxy, consuming and assimilating every race they encountered. Now, they had their sights set on Earth. But humans weren't like the other species the Grintax had faced. They didn't submit to fear, didn't break when backed into a corner. Instead, they fought harder. "Lieutenant Farah, bring up the tactical map," John ordered. The map flickered to life, displaying the positions of the human fleet and the Grintax swarm. The human ships were clustered together, forming a defensive line around Earth, while the Grintax fleet advanced like a dark wave, ready to crash into them. "They're going to hit us head-on, overwhelming our defenses in minutes," said Captain Yara, a strategist and one of the finest tacticians in the fleet. She had never lost a battle until now, it seemed. "Not if we hit them first," John replied, a dangerous glint in his eye. Captain Yara raised an eyebrow. "You can't be serious. If we go on the offensive now, we'll be wiped out before they even reach us." John chuckled. "That's what they'll expect, but we're not giving them what they want." The bridge went quiet as John stood and walked over to the holographic map. He began shifting ship markers, reorganizing the human fleet into a tight formation that looked almost suicidal. The ironclad and its sister ships were positioned at the front, while the rest of the fleet fanned out behind them in an unusual spread. "They're counting on us to sit here and defend Earth like it's our last stand," John explained. "But if we charge forward, right into the heart of their fleet, they'll have no choice but to react. Their hive mind makes them predictable when they're under pressure." Lieutenant Farah's eyes widened. "You want us to charge their strongest formation?" "Exactly. We're going to cut off the head of the swarm, take out their queen ship, and the rest will fall into disarray." Captain Yara hesitated, her tactical mind running through 1,000 simulations. "That's incredibly risky, but it just might work." "Risky's what we do best," John said with a grin. "Now get to your stations. It's time to teach these bugs why they shouldn't mess with humans." As the fleet moved into position, the tension on the bridge was palpable. Every crew member felt the weight of the moment, knowledge that, if they failed, humanity's days would be numbered. "All ships, this is Commander Harrison." John spoke into the comms. "I know the odds aren't in our favor. I know you're scared, but I also know what humans are capable of when the chips are down. We don't surrender. We don't back down. Today, we show the galaxy what it means to fight like humans." Cheers erupted across the comms as the human fleet surged forward, engines roaring to life as they charged into the heart of the Grintax swarm. The alien ships, momentarily stunned by the audacity of the move, scrambled to react, but the human fleet was already upon them. The ironclad led the charge, its weapons tearing through the first wave of Grintax ships. Explosions lit up the void of space as human vessels darted in and out of the enemy formation, hitting fast and hard. The Grintax, accustomed to overwhelming their foes with sheer numbers, were caught off guard by the ferocity and unpredictability of the human attack. John stood at the helm, barking orders as the battle raged around him. Focus fire on the Queen ship. All cannons, all missiles, everything we've got. The ironclad shuddered as it took a direct hit, but John didn't flinch. He had been in worse situations before. The Queen ship, a massive, pulsating vessel at the center of the swarm, loomed ahead. It was heavily armored and surrounded by a fleet of escorts, but John didn't care. They had one chance to end this. Nah, he shouted. The combined firepower of the human fleet converged on the Queen ship. For a moment, it seemed indestructible, shrugging off the attacks, but then, with a blinding flash of light, the Queen ship exploded, sending shockwaves through the Grintax fleet. Immediately, the Grintax ships faltered, their hive mind shattered by the loss of their leader. What had been a coordinated attack dissolved into chaos. In the aftermath of the battle, the human fleet drifted in the debris field of the falling Grintax ships. The air was thick with a sense of relief, but also the kind of exhaustion that followed a new catastrophe. For many, this victory would be a day remembered in the annals of history, a triumph over an enemy that had nearly crushed humanity beneath its claws. On board the ironclad, the crew was still buzzing with the high of survival, even if their bodies were worn from the intensity of battle. Commander John "Old Dog" Harrison, however, remained seated in his command chair, his eyes gazing out into the endless expanse of space. His thoughts were already on the future, as they often were. "Damage reports," John asked, his voice calm, though weariness crept in around the edges. Lieutenant Farah approached, datapad in hand. "Significant damage to the outer hull, several systems need repair, and we lost 3 destroyers, but overall, we're still in one piece, sir." John nodded. "Good. Get the repair teams working immediately. I want this ship ready for action as soon as possible." Farah hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Sir, with respect, we've just dealt the biggest blow to the Grintax in the history of this war. Their hive mind is broken. Don't you think it's time to, I don't know, take a break, celebrate?" John's eyes flicked over to her, sharp but softened with the burden of his years. "Celebrate when the war is won, Lieutenant. This battle was only a step. The swarm will rebuild, and we'll have to be ready when they come back." Farah wanted to argue, to tell him that he deserved to rest after all he had done, but she knew better. Old Dog wasn't just a nickname, it was a mantle. John Harrison didn't know how to stop. He had carried humanity through some of its darkest hours, and he wouldn't stop until the job was done. As Farah walked away, Captain Yara entered the bridge, her expression a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "Mind if I join you, Commander?" John waved her over, gesturing to the seat next to his. "By all means, Captain, have a seat." Yara Saturday, taking a moment to glance at the stars beyond the viewport. "You pulled off something remarkable today, John. I have to admit, when you ordered that charge, I thought we were signing our death warrants." John chuckled. "You weren't the only one, but when you've been in as many battles as I have, you learn that sometimes the best tactic is the one no one expects, even the enemy." Yara studied him, the lines on his face deepened by years of conflict. "How do you do it? After all this time, you're the oldest commander still on active duty, and yet you fight like a man with nothing to lose." John was silent for a moment, considering her question. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I do it because someone has to. When I joined the fleet all those years ago, I swore an oath to protect humanity. That hasn't changed. I've lost friends, seen entire colonies wiped out, and fought battles that should have broken me. But I'm still here, because as long as I'm breathing, I can still fight." He paused, his gaze hardening. "And I'll keep fighting until we don't have to anymore." Yara nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted to admit. She had her own scars, her own losses, But something about John was different. His resolve, his absolute refusal to give in, no matter the odds, had earned him a legendary status among the fleet, and yet, he never let it go to his head. He was just John, the old dog who kept getting up when the universe knocked him down. Suddenly, a crackle came through the comms. "Commander Harrison, priority message from High Command." John straightened. "Patch it through." A hologram flickered to life in front of them, displaying the stern face of Admiral Vance, the highest ranking officers in the United Earth Navy. His expression was grim, as usual. "Commander Harrison, Captain Yara," Vance began, his voice gravelly. "First, congratulations are in order. You've managed to cripple the Grintax swarm in a way we didn't think was possible. The Queen ship's destruction has bought us precious time, but I'm afraid the situation is far from over." John leaned forward, already sensing the weight of what was coming. "What's the situation, Admiral?" Vance sighed, rubbing a hand over his weathered face. "Our intelligence suggests that while the Grintax hive mind is damaged, it's not gone. We've detected signs of reformation in several key systems on the outer rim. It looks like their war machine is already rebuilding itself. Worse, we believe they're trying to evolve a new Queen Oni stronger, more resilient than the last." John's jaw tightened. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Vance replied. "Weeks, maybe a month, but this time, they won't just send a fleet. They're going to throw everything they have as. Their species is designed to adapt, and with their backs against the wall, they'll be more dangerous than ever." John exchanged a look with Yara, both of them understanding the gravity of the situation. One battle had been won, but the war was far from over. "What's our next move?" Yara asked. Vance's hologram shifted, showing a star map. "We need to take the fight to them before they can fully regroup. We've identified several key hive systems. If we strike now, we might be able to prevent them from evolving a new queen. This could be our last chance to end the war on our terms." John nodded, his resolve hardening. "We'll be ready, Admiral." Vance gave him a long, measured look. "I know you will, Commander. Earth is counting on you, again." As the hologram blinked out, silence settled over the bridge. Yara turned to John, her expression serious. "Looks like we're not done after all." John stood, his old bows protesting slightly, but he ignored them. He had a word to finish. "Prepare the fleet, Captain," John said, his voice as steady as ever. "We're going hunting." And so, the old dog prepared for one last fight. He knew the odds were stacked against them. He knew the enemy would evolve, become stronger, more ruthless, but that didn't matter. Humanity had something the Grintax never would: an unbreakable will, forged in the fires of countless battles, led by the stubborn determination of people like John Harrison. As long as the old dog was still in the fight, there was hope.